Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a magician and writer. He has spent decades researching techniques for undoing our conditioning and changing our realities, including chaos magic, psychedelics, and the alchemy of sensed energy. He is a qualified, connected breathwork coach and a leading light in the chaos magic organization, the Illuminates of Thanatos. He is the author of the groundbreaking new volume, Life Force, Sensed Energy in Breathwork, Psychedelia, and Chaos Magic. Welcome to the show, David Lee.
Okay, thank you.
How are you doing today?
Yes, not bad at all. And you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to have you on the show. I looked at your book and I listened to a little bit of your interviews. It's fascinating stuff. And what I like in the intro is the unconditioning. What are the techniques that we can do to kind of uncondition our mind? Because when I started my path, that was kind of the thing. I realized there's something going on. I need to unprogram myself and then reprogram myself. So for those who don't know you, do you want to just introduce yourself and a little bit about your work and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I suppose you could describe me as a magician with a science background, or it runs right through my life to a large extent. The sort of interface between magic and weirdness and science. And when I was a child, I was fascinated by science, but I think I got that fascination from realizing that, or for me, that it was a kind of a magic, that there was one. I have a very vivid recollection of the moment when I first gave up magic, as it were. I was like 4 years old, and I was told that magic wasn't real, and it had some kind of immense effect on me. I can't remember the emotion. I can just vividly remember the scene, but I do know that after that I got really interested in science, and that was my whole track through school. But then in my late teens, I was growing up in the late 60s, early 70s. So, of course, I tried LSD, and that gave me a number of experiences which were decidedly magical, particularly of an energy magic type, which obviously we'll come on to later. That's where the subtitle of the book refers to. Really, I had a couple of years of doing all that sort of living that crazy lifestyle and stuff, and then went to university and got a science degree. And only after that did I sort of try to fuse the two together, really. It was not, instead of just one lifestyle flipping over into another, it was a case of, okay, where can I go with this? I started meditating, and then I bumped into the chaos magic current in the late 70s. I was a postgraduate student at Leeds University in the north of England at the time, doing some scientific research. And at the same time, I met a bunch of people who were into magic, and I came across this book by Peter Carroll called Liber Null, which was the first sort of totally chaos magic book. There were books before that had some of those elements in there, but that was the book that really started it all. And I thought, like, here's a model of magic that I can be with as someone who has gone through the whole process of scientific skepticism. And here's something that I can work with that doesn't require that you believe in some, passed on tradition, thousands of years old, that someone's going to illuminate you into, or that you believe that that there are spirits floating around everywhere or whatever. Not that that's necessarily a wrong belief, but it's usually it's usually the other side. It's usually people are either have some sort of religious and mystical beliefs, or they're into science, whereas I wanted to fuse the two together, and chaos magic is the skeptic's way, really, or it was at that point. That's how it appeared to me. It was a scheme of approaching magic from the point of view of someone who's been brought up in a culture which is massively skeptical of magic. So that was really where, that was my sort of maturing point. At some point in my mid-20s, the whole thing started to coalesce, and so I started to think of myself as a chaos magician.
Wow, interesting. Well, I like how you have the science background, because that always helps. For me, I was always into the mystical type of stuff. So with your research into the science and trying to marry the two, like, what is chaos magic about? What is the book about? What have you learned? What are some of the techniques?
Okay, well, the original approach of chaos magic was basically very strongly based. Have you heard of a guy called Robert Anton Wilson?
Yes.
American writer, Californian writer who was absolutely massive through the 70s, 80s, died about 10 years ago. He came up, he really originated the idea that became the core idea in chaos magic, although he didn't invent the idea of chaos magic. He called it multi-model agnosticism. In other words, whatever situation you're in, you can come up with a model for it, which might be a religious model, a scientific model, a psychological model, blah, blah, whatever. But it's not the ultimate truth. And that you can only be sort of honest with yourself if you admit everything, but B, that you're free to switch between different truth criteria. You're free to switch between a scientific model, like the mainstream, or you could use a psychological model, which is kind of a variant of the scientific one with a bit more space in it, or you can switch straight to a magical model. And all of those three kinds of approaches to decoding reality can be kept in the same mind. So this is Wilson's big idea: multi-model agnosticism. Agnosticism in the sense of I can't make an absolute statement about what's happening. Multi-model in the sense that there are all sorts of models for dealing with whatever you're in, and each of them could be very useful. But just use the one that's useful. Don't get stuck with it as a permanent belief system. So that was the starting point, really, I think, for chaos magic. The most important insight in Peter Carroll's first book, Liber Null, back in 1978, was that magic is dependent on belief. And what we believe about what we're experiencing affects what's going on. Yeah, this has been diluted into that sort of new age mush about, you create your own reality, man, and sort of thing. But this is kind of it's similar, but a bit more rigorous. It's saying, well, how do we do this? And so the first point is that you need to be able to shift your belief system. First, shift your big belief system so that, okay, instead of just thinking, right, I'm a diehard materialist or atheist or whatever, you can think, okay, today I'm a magician, or for the next hour I'm a magician. That's the first shift. And then you get in shifts within that shift that say, okay, what kind of magician, what kind of style do I want to use here? Am I working with energy? Am I working with a particular tradition? Am I working with spirits? All that kind of stuff. Various other beliefs that you get used to having, these nested beliefs that end up in you doing some action. So an action that might be described as a ritual, it might be really elaborate. You might put loads of wonderful robes on and burn loads of incense and have a room that's beautifully decked out with the right coloured candles and lights and everything, and tapestries and all that stuff. Or it may be as simple as, one of the simplest rituals I ever attended was a friend of mine got us all to just step over a line drawn on the floor. You had to do loads of mental preparation beforehand, but that was the ritual. All you did was step over this line. Of course, that whole business about there being a line you can or cannot step over is deeply embedded in popular mythology anyway. We talk about, that's a line I will not cross, and so forth. And that can be made into a powerful metaphor for leaving one state of being, for leaving one state of existence, one state of your everyday life, and then moving into another where things are different. So magic is all about change. It's all about having the ability, the capacity, the power, if you like, to change from one set of conditions to another. But all of that stuff is powered by a different element, and that's what Peter Carroll called gnosis, the old Greek word gnosis, which is usually translated in the older documents. It's something like divine knowledge or divine intuitive knowledge, something like that. He meant it purely as like an altered state of consciousness, an ASC, which can be anything from mild disorientation caused by spinning on your own axis or something, through to hours of dancing, through to sex, through to psychoactive drugs, through to prolonged ritual preparation. All of these things cause a change in your state of consciousness. So you need to be kind of uncoupled from your normal worldview. You need to sort of be able to drop away the beliefs that say, I'm not a magician, magic's impossible, I'm just an ordinary blah, blah, blah. You need to be able to drop all that away and go into a special space, which you might think of as your temple or your inner temple, and there you arrange things so that you create a little micro universe, which is better than the one you were previously in, and you sort of make that happen by an act of will and let go of it and come back to your ordinary life. And that, the idea is that should ripple through your ordinary life and cause the changes you need to occur. So you've got two things going on there. You've got this ability to shift between one set of beliefs and another, vitally centrally important in magic. And the kind of lube that makes all that happen is the altered state of consciousness.
Amazing. I love all that. It's so simple because, you know, what you're speaking about is being able to shift your perspective.
Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, you kind of cut out.
Sorry, I thought you could.
Yeah, the internet's been a little bit unstable, unfortunately, but I'm getting what you're saying. Sometimes it just gets a little robotic. But you can hear me, right?
Okay, good. Oh, okay. There was a bit of a breakup there was a bit of a breakup in your voice just then, but I can mainly hear what you're saying. Yeah.
And actually, I'm just remembering now. Every single time I've had a guest on from the UK, you're my third one. There's always a little bit of delay in the connection for some reason. I don't know what it is. If it's going farther or something, but it's happened before. I just remembering that right now. I had Danny Nemu on. He was really interesting, and a couple other guys. But
you
know his work.
He's a good guy. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've got one of his books, and I've met him a few times. Yeah, he's a very, very likable guy.
Nice. Yeah. So what I like, the main point of what I really like about what you're saying is you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably some.
There's like this gap. I had it last time. It's like a 5-second gap. So, what it's saying is that I really like how what you're talking about is shifting the perspective, having the ability to shift your perspective and change your reality. And a lot of the time you actually need to change the physical body. So in neuro-linguistic programming, they say the first thing to shift your internal state is just change your body. You could jump up and down. You could do jumping jacks. You could, do like a little ceremony, but whatever you want to do. But the idea is you're moving the physical body first, and you're kind of like commanding your own reality, where on the other side is you kind of get mechanical. You get a little bit into a rut, and everything stays the same. And so you become more rigid, and it's a little bit more difficult to affect change. So maybe you can go into that a little bit deeper on maybe some processes that people can do to start.
Sure, yeah.
Because the main fundamental thing is you can change your reality. Like magic, or I heard God referenced in a different way. Is like everybody here is God, meaning you have the power to create and shift your reality. And I was like, that's true. And it only happens to the individual. So whether you want to call it magic, religion, spirituality, whatever, you have 100% ability to change and affect your reality. And that's a huge thing.
Well, I mean, in a certain sense, I mean, some people would say that some magicians would say that we're doing magic all the time, that we're constantly creating this reality, except that in most cases it's a boring, tragic and restrictive one, whereas you can actually make it more alive, less restricted and more ideal than tragic. It's possible to transform all of these things. But to go to your main point there about physical techniques, yes. I mean, if you look at just through all the traditions, from shamanic dancing and ecstatic movements and shamanism through to the very sophisticated and scientific stuff in yoga about different bodily postures, you've got, people have recognized this for a long, long time. I think one of the basic wisdoms is learning to sit still and to notice the current of your breath. This is obviously at the beginning of basic meditation. Anything from, if you need to meditate to calm down, if you need to meditate because you're following the 8 limbs of yoga kind of procedure. But just learn to sit down, sit still. It doesn't have to be in a fancy lotus posture or anything. It can just be in your office chair, but learn to sit still and to be aware of the whole of your body. And then learn to, once you've been able to do that, if you can do that for 15, 20 minutes without getting up and switching your phone on or sort of like reading a book or, whatever, then that's a good start. And then once you can do that 15 or 20 minutes, start not so much thinking about, it's paying attention to the current of your breath. So just notice it, going in and coming out, notice if there are any sort of catches in it, such as, maybe very emotional find there's a sort of breath alters, just learning to appreciate how the energy of breath flows through you from moment to moment all the time. Once you've got those two, you
still there, David?
okay, we're back.
Yeah, I dropped out.
Switch my video off and on because your face disappeared and mine appeared. Yeah, did you have a break in it there?
One sec. I'm gonna stop my video too.
Pardon?
I'm gonna stop my video too. There we go. Hopefully this.
I can't hear you now. It's badly broken up.
I just paused my video, so hopefully that will help.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Cool. So where you dropped off last, and it kind of went robotic. So hopefully the internet will cooperate with us. You were talking about the basic importance of just connecting with your breath and just.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we just go ahead with just audio. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll just go with the audio.
Feeling and experiencing the rhythm of your breath. This gets you very much in your body and very much in your body in present time with the flow of energy that's caused by your breath. And then I was picking up on something you said about if you feel stuck in a particular state. Very good thing, yeah. My particular version of that I like, something that somebody taught me years ago, which is a kind of controlled shaking. And this is a really good exercise if you live in the cold northern parts of the world, no doubt cold southern ones as well. Basically, because it gets you warm as well as produces an altered state and loosens you up. You just stand there and shake all of your muscles, basically. Start off with just shaking your hands a little bit and move that up so that you're wriggling your shoulders, and you start shaking your torso about, and your hips and your legs, and it's like dancing in one place. You don't necessarily have to move your feet very much, just get all of your muscles trembling and shaking. And don't whip your neck about. That's the one you don't, because that can produce unpleasant effects. But generally speaking, just get all of the muscles going in your body and sort of shaking and breathing deeper and breathing through the mouth. And this will produce a kind of like a very hot, clear kind of state, sort of mentally clear, very focused, and it'll warm you up, generally speaking. So that's a nice one. That's a nice break state exercise. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, I love all those. Okay, so we're talking about breath, and you go into your book a lot about breath, and you're a breath coach. And this is coming up a lot in yoga. It's coming up, all over the place. Do you want to explore a little bit about breath, psychedelia, or which way do you want to go with it?
Okay. Well, okay. I'll tell the story of the book to some extent. I don't know if you've got a copy of this book, Life Force, Sensed Energy in Breathwork, Psychedelia and Chaos Magic. I have to remind myself of the title there, that long second bit. Basically, what got me into the idea of energy in magical energy, was my psychedelic experiences in my late teens. What enabled me to make some personal breakthroughs was a particular form of breathwork called connected breathwork, which is, it's a technique that's shared by rebirthing breathwork and holotropic breathwork, which you may have heard of. And the chaos magic bit is that once I'd started writing a book about breathwork, I realized that I would have to. Well, I started off about 6 years ago, deciding to write a book that would have a look at all the different styles, a number of different styles of breath work. Now, I could say all because there are an infinite number, I suppose, but certainly many of the different styles of breath work, and comparing them and trying to understand what technology this was, what technologies these were. And so I practiced a whole range of breath styles myself, and there used to be an online magical college. Oh, it still exists actually, it's very different now, called arcanoriumcollege.com. And I did a couple of courses there that involved breath work. And so I also had students researching along with me who weren't credited in the book, basically trying out a number of different breathwork practices and comparing them. But the more I thought about the book, I started writing this book and got a good deal of it together. And then I realized that I wasn't saying anything about the experience of energy, which is really quite central to the connected breathwork and some other forms of breathwork as well, a sense of energy flowing through you. And I thought, well, I've got to address that as well. So I had to start talking about things like Qigong, sort of Taoist, Chinese Taoist alchemy, energy alchemy that we get through Qigong and so forth, and talk about some of the experiments with group energy that had been done in the chaos magic world that I'm in. So the book became a much bigger project. And of course, I also had to honor my initial introduction to magical energy, which was through psychedelics. So those are the kind of three focuses around the book. But the main chunk of the book is really about breathwork techniques. And I hadn't really done a great deal of breathwork until about 25, well, a bit more now, early 90s. I was introduced to it at a seminar. Lionel Snell, in fact, the author, was running a workshop on breathwork at a chaos magic seminar in Austria. And I went along to this and I had an amazing experience, basically. I was just doing this particular style of breathing for 20 minutes. And I went through an extraordinary cycle of emotions, which there was a big peak of anger, which then dispersed and left me thinking, wow, to get that much change in what's going on inside me emotionally with just this simple breathing technique, that's amazing. I've got to learn more about this. So I came back to England and I found a local rebirthing practitioner and went along to him for a session every couple of weeks for a few months and got some really good results. Well, the results I was getting were, it's a very specific kind of breath work that does produce a heightened sense of energy, but it also helps resolve stuck emotional states. And I was having a difficult year that year, and so it was very, very helpful with that. And I was so impressed by all of this, I decided I needed to study it professionally. So the first opportunity I got onto a professional training course in Vivation, which is another brand name in that area of breathwork. It developed out of rebirthing breathwork, and it's more or less the same. So I got qualified in that in 1993. I was taught to do one-to-one sessions so that people can engage in their own inner emotional healing and energy adjustment. But I was invited to do it for groups. And so I formulated my way of coaching slightly differently. I changed my way of coaching to suit it for group sessions. And I was getting far more energy experiences. Once people are in a group, they start noticing these energy flows and so forth. So that was already tilting over into that area. At about the same time, around the turn of the millennium, some chaos magicians I was working with came up with this structure made of human beings, sort of ritual structure where everybody's touching or not touching in particular kind of geometry, called it chaotron. And loads more, much simpler geometries have since been explored, which work just as well. This one was very, very complicated at the beginning, but it produced impressive effects, which is how the thing caught on amongst that group of people. Basically, you get some just very unusual experiences of what you might call magical energy. And breath is very central in the same rhythm, then you will get group effects occurring. Obviously, there's the NLP type description of this, which of course is that everybody is coming into resonance with each other, because they all look and feel You can hear each other's breath and so forth. So you're all getting into a nice resonance with each other. But there does seem to be something a bit more exotic happening as well on the actual level of energy there. Okay, well, I've just run off into all sorts of ideas there. I'll just take a pause there and see what comes up next.
Sure. Yeah.
Any more questions to ask on that?
Yeah, I love all that, and I've explored breathwork myself, and interesting. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I sound like a robot on my end.
No, I can hear you fine at the moment.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Having all kinds of maybe Mercury retrograde glitches. I don't know what's going on. I thought it was over.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the power of breathwork is huge, and a lot of people are exploring it. Wim Hof is popularizing it a lot, and you get results. I've experienced rebirthing as well, very powerful. Do you want to share some of the actual techniques? So we know that
Sure.
Maybe you could, because you've touched on it a little bit, but some of the benefits of doing it, and then maybe one or two of your favorite techniques that somebody listening can give it a try and see what they get, because the thing that I love about breath work, it's very tangible. You feel it, and you experience it, and it can be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the technique that my own sort of career in breathwork is built on is this connected breathwork technique. So I'll talk about that first. It is kind of a specialized technique. It's very different. When you first start doing any kind of meditation training, or you pick up some book of basic magical training, and you get the kind of advice that I was giving out earlier about learning to sit still and pay attention to the current of your breath. Usually you get instructions with the breathing stuff to lengthen your breath, to lengthen the hold. That's, once you've breathed in, hold the breath a little, and then breathe out, and then pause before breathing in again, to lengthen the hold and pause. So you end up with a very slow, long breath. This is great for calming you down and getting into a nice meditational state. However, the connected breath work kind of goes in the opposite direction. You eliminate all holds and pauses so that you breathe continuously. So that as soon as you've stopped breathing in, you start breathing out. As soon as you finish the exhale, you start the next inhale. So you're always on a sort of like a sine wave curve instead of this more staccato stop and start curve of normal pranayama. So for a start, it's different. What this does, and also you breathe a little faster and fuller than feels, at least for the beginning of the session. What this does, this slightly accelerated continuous breathing, is after anything between 2 and 10 minutes, it will produce an altered state of consciousness, which at first you might get a feeling of being slightly, it's a bit like being drunk for a few seconds, sort of a swoony kind of a feeling. You might get some tingling in your fingers. All that passes. And then what you get is a state where basically your inner sensations, your sensations from inside your body, your feelings are at a greater volume than your thoughts. So you're not trying to banish thoughts. As you know, that's pointless. You can't banish them. They just come back harder if you try. But you can ignore them in some situations. You can ignore the sort of string of babbling thoughts. And when you're doing this kind of breath work, you tend to find that what's going on, what the stuff you're getting from your body is more interesting and more intense than what's coming from your thoughts. So instead of just the usual thoughts about worries and anticipations and all of that, and memories, you're actually just vividly in the moment of actually feeling intenser feelings. I mean, feelings in both senses, feelings in the sense of emotions. It could be an actual emotion, sorrow or joy or laughter, or it could be just physical sensation, something that doesn't feel as important, like a weird sort of tension somewhere in your body, or an itch in your knee, or whatever, all of those kind of things. But anyway, whatever it is, pay attention to it. So what you do is you develop this very strong absorption eventually in what's going on from moment to moment. And this tends to break through into bliss, basically. You will, after a while, either go into bliss anyway and without any problem, or otherwise you'll find yourself in an emotion which is uncomfortable. It's not one you like. But with this type of breath work, instead of avoiding it by just starting thinking again and going and doing something else, you focus on what it feels like, and you focus on exactly how it feels in your body, and you keep coming back to that again and again. And you learn very rapidly in this how to turn up or turn down the intensity of sensations with how deeply you're breathing. I'll go into the actual technique in a minute. Just I wanted to give a bit of background here to get an idea of how it's generally used and the kind of effects it's likely to have. So either you're likely to go into bliss within about 20 minutes, or maybe even sooner, or you'll get into an uncomfortable state, and then you'll have to work through that just by paying attention to it and keeping breathing and paying attention to it. And that might take another 20 minutes or so. A typical session's about an hour. But what will happen at the end of it is that you'll usually get a big load of bliss again, and it's usually more intense than if you didn't have that troublesome emotion in the first place. You're showing yourself that each moment in your experience is a potential gateway to bliss through being aware of bodily sensation in real time, of being in your body in real time. That gives you a tremendous ability to experience bliss. The actual technique is, like I said, it's to do with breathing without pause or stop or hold the out breath, and there's no hold at the top of the in breath. Instead, you just let the breath go in and out a little bit faster than usual. The other thing we usually add as a technique is breathe through your mouth. Now, this is in direct conflict with what some people say you should be doing in pranayama. There are some interpretations of pranayama that say it doesn't actually, and you don't do it all the time anyway. So, but if you just do it for an hour occasionally, it definitely causes no harm at all. And what it produces is it produces more intense sensation of energy, and it also produces more intense emotion. I think the reason for that is because the only time that we normally naturally breathe through our mouths is through physical exertion or heightened emotion. So it probably reminds us of those states. So you're breathing through your mouth, you're connecting all your breaths, that connected wave, and relax the out breath. That's the other piece of advice we normally give. I'm giving quite a bit of detail about the technique here, and obviously please go ahead and try it, but in some ways I'm not that keen on people just going ahead and trying it as a sole test of this, because if you don't have somebody to coach you, then it's quite possible you'll have an unremarkable and boring session. You think, this stuff does nothing. Because you might not have been getting quite to that edge where it gets interesting. Or you might find that you just immediately throw up some unpleasant emotion and you haven't got the experience or the coaching to deal with it. So you just shut it down. You go, okay, I can't be doing with this. This just feels unpleasant. You won't come to any harm. There's no chance of coming to any harm. But this might mean that people are put off doing breath work. So I'd caution that. But anyway, I said I would tell you about the technique, so this is a bit more about it. Relax the out breath. If you're breathing fast and full, I'll show you what fast and full is like for me at the moment with a relaxed out breath. It's something along the lines of I don't know whether you could see or hear that to get the idea of the rhythm, but it's quite a soft breath, even though it's quite fast and full. If you've got a tensed out breath, it gets much closer to hyperventilation, which sounds much more like this. So you've got this like muscular tension in the mouth and throat when you're breathing out. This produces a very, very rapid altered state of consciousness, but it's not a pleasant one, because this is actually associated with panic attacks. People who have panic attacks can actually get a lot of usefulness out of this kind of breath work, because it actually shows the person how they induce the unpleasant altered state of consciousness that is at the core of a breath-based panic attack. A lot of people do this with breath. So once you've learned how you do it, it can really help to unlock that and think, I don't have to do that. But yes, if you start breathing like that, that really forceful, fast and deep breath, you will go into, that's technically known as hyperventilation. It generally produces unpleasant states. It's not medically dangerous, despite what some people say, but it certainly produces unpleasant states. So not to be recommended. So those are basically the three things you're doing. You're breathing through your mouth, you're connecting all your breaths, and you've got a relaxed out breath. The rest of the instruction, I don't think I can fit on here without people, actually trying it out in real time. It doesn't mean a great deal, but basically there's three different kinds of breaths you use. You can breathe fast and full, like I was just demonstrating, which is always good to start the session, kick things off, get lots of energy feelings circulating. You can do fast and shallow, which calms things down, or you might spontaneously go into a third breath, which is slow and full, which is bliss breathing, but which, if you're not in a state of bliss, can make things feel less pleasant. So all of these things are very conditional, but that's the basic technology. So I hope that made sense.
Yes. Awesome. I love it. Well, I've been exploring breath a lot more the last couple of years, and I love being walked through different techniques, because a lot of the times they produce different results and they're very tangible. If somebody wants to explore this, so do you want to walk me through maybe a 10-second or a 20-second one that I can just go through? And then if somebody wants to just have a basic practice to explore, they can maybe continue that.
Okay. Well, an exercise that is, I didn't invent this exercise, it's called 20 breaths, and that's all it is, 20 breaths. It's been around I don't know who invented it, it's been around on the breathwork world for at least 30 years. And basically you just take 20 connected breaths in the following pattern. So get yourself somewhere, you can be lying down or sitting up, it doesn't matter, standing up even, somewhere where your chest is free to move, your throat's not restricted. And through your mouth, take 4 deep breaths, a little bit faster, a little bit fuller, and feel natural, a little bit deeper, a little bit faster and feels natural. And then take a staggeringly deep breath, as deep as you can manage, so that it fills you right to the top. And then you can spend some time doing that, and then let that come out slowly. So I'll show you this cycle of 5, to get an idea of. Don't stick to my pace. You find your own pace, but this is the relative pace of the 5 breaths. So something like 4, then 5th. And keep pushing that one out until you've really emptied yourself. So it's the longest breath you can make. And when you've pushed it all out, start the cycle again. 4 deep breaths, 1 super deep breath. 4 deep breaths, 1 super deep breath. And all of them connected, all of them through the mouth. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. And I appreciate that, because for me, when I'm either reading a book or exploring a guest, I like to have the techniques so I can apply them and see the result. And again, the thing with breath is it's a very tangible experience, and it goes into the realization that the body is the technology. And I think that anybody listening to this, I was trying to think in my mind, I was like, okay, people are listening, and why is this tangible? How do I create that gap? And the biggest thing that's creating stress and anxiety and confusion within people that I see and I speak to is they're not connected to their body. They don't know how to clear their mind. And it's like, oh, I can't meditate because this, and this, and I got too much stuff to do, and there's this stress, and there's, this is the way life is. And all you actually have to do is learn to either, quiet your mind through meditation, or do breathing techniques and start to connect to your body and get into the body. And that's what yoga does. That's what skateboarding does for me. That's what martial arts does. You get into the body and you start to recognize how powerful and incredible and amazing it is. The body, the human body, is the technology. And so this is helping you to explore it. And I like what you touched on earlier is, you can create, life is magic. It really is. You look at flowers and birds, and you just pay attention to your surroundings. Look at a 3 or a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old go out and play. Life is magic. And somewhere we make it serious, and we get caught in this game of mundane and all the other things that go with it, and it becomes bland and boring. And through your own consciousness, you can make life magical each and every day through your perspective, and you're the only one who can do it, right? It's your choice. It can be terrible and serious and awful, or it can be fun. You can go out there and you can explore, whether you want to call it magic or awareness, or seeing what you're affecting in your reality, because each of us is creating our own reality. And I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, where it's like, we're creating a reality like in microseconds over and over and over and over and over again. And it's really fascinating. So if you come at it as a perspective from like a rose colored lens, like if you had that rose color, but you can switch out any lens you want. You can explore the day as a magician, or you can test your awareness, find out how many circles you can see for the day, or, pay attention to the language of the birds, or, really focus in on sound for a day, just really like tuning your ears and just pretend you're, I don't know, something like an owl that has super sound or whatever. And what starts to happen is you connect to different parts of yourself. And the last thing that I'll say on this rant and pass it back and let you comment is, I was reading Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. I reference it all the time on the podcast because it's so amazing. But it talks about the animals, and when the masters in the books do something like bilocate, or they change the weather, or they do something incredible, all of the scientists and the people in the book are like, they're always like, how the heck did you do that? Like what? And they're like, and every single time the masters are like, you can do this too. We're not special. You can learn how to do this. And one of the things that they share is like, your animals have these super senses, and they can migrate, and do all these incredible things. He's like, you are a superior being to the animal. You can do what they do and way more. But right now you're not even at a level of consciousness where you can access, what the animal can do, but you're a superior consciousness. You're a superior technology. You're a superior being, in the way that you're built. And so from that kind of mindset, it's like, okay, cool. What are my abilities? What are my limits? And that's something for me that I've pursued in my life, is wanting to test. What am I capable of? What are humans capable of? And opening up that perspective and possibility to explore that. So I'll let you comment on that.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I totally got what you're saying. This business about not being stuck in your mind. You started off with that. It's a really good point about people being stuck in their minds. Oh, I can't meditate because I've got all this stuff going on in my head or something. And if you actually, a little bit of discipline of the body, such as sitting meditation or such as martial arts, like you've mentioned, it's all good stuff. Swimming, skateboarding, dancing, whatever, singing, all of these things, all of these ways of disciplining the body produce changes in the state of your consciousness, and which are good. And there's this rejection of the body that is very unhelpful spiritually, I think. I mean, I heard somebody not so long ago use the term meat suit for the body, someone who, is a highly spiritual kind of person. I think probably coming from a Buddhist tradition. And I thought, wow, that is a really negative way of thinking about the body, as if it's just some disposable thing you're going to throw away one day, rather than the actual way in which you relate to the entire universe. To the entire universal experience. I mean, all right, there's an inner universe where you can track the source of your being right to the core, and to the one that is at the core of everything. But that isn't a state you're in all the time. Most of the time you're walking around in this body. It's not a meat suit. It's a multidimensional bit of technology, like you said. And this has come into our culture through, largely through the flesh loathing of Christianity. But it was then refined into a new and possibly even more dangerous form with the thoughts of René Descartes in the 17th century, who said, I think, therefore I am, and created the famous Cartesian dualism between spirit or mind and body. And this is like deeply unhelpful. It's led science off in a direction which has been productive for technology and absolutely disastrous for true scientific understanding of the universe. It's led us off in a direction of ecocide and cruelty to animals and all sorts of other directions based on the idea that all that matters is this germ of conscious awareness that I've got, and everything else is kind of just this veil of tears or a lot of rubbish that we're moving through. So I think the Cartesian duality, well, it's just one of the forms of this basic dualism of mind and body, where mind good, body bad, basically is what it amounts to, despite what some of its apologists say. That's really that's really the bottom line. And this has had a massively culturally toxic effect, I think. And it's so one of the things that magic has come along for, and one of the things that psychedelics has come along for, and one of the things that the revival of interest in an open-ended kind of spirituality has come along for, is to one of the things it needs to do is undo this wretched weighted dualism.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that culturally, especially for women, it's like body shaming. You're supposed to look a certain way, and that's an interesting concept. I haven't had anybody put it on the show exactly like that, but this subtle rejection from culture between mind and body, this split, and really rethinking it to this, they say the body is the temple, and what about the body is this multidimensional piece of advanced technology that connects you to the universe. That's way more powerful, and you're upgrading that thought. It's really, really beautiful. And then we will learn to respect our bodies more and really thank the body. And what's happening is people, number one, they're not getting into their technology. It's like you have this spaceship to explore nature. You can go touch the tree. You can taste food. You can hear all the sounds of nature and your surroundings. And you're in this incredible machine, temple, suit, however you want to phrase it. And what's happening, I think a lot of people, they're not happy with their bodies. They shame themselves, and they're getting shamed for how it looks. This physical representation is just like, just let that go. Just take care of it. Get into your body through breathing, through meditation, feel what it's like. That's what yoga is about. I remember doing Kriya yoga a long time ago, and it just, going into each limb, like into your pinky and then into your hand and then the forearm and squeezing the forearm and just getting into the body. It's so simple. And I think that that's the disconnection between ourselves and our surroundings and our happiness and our anxiety and things like that. We're not in our bodies. And when you get into your body, you start to realize how powerful a being you are, that you are fine, that you are connected to nature, you are connected to source and all things, and you are friggin' powerful piece of incredible technology. And so it's a simple shift, and just it will change the entire game. And if you look at society, I would say a good 90% of people don't know they don't get into their body, they don't do any of those practices, and they kind of become robotic and machine-like because there are agendas for people. Like there's people that have businesses and they need you to run them. They need workers, and you become that worker rather than that creator of your reality. It's not bad to have a job. It's great to have a job. It's great to have work, and you're a creator. What do you want to create? What's exciting? You're on this planet. What do you want to create? And you get a whole lifetime to figure that out. And so I'll let you comment on that if you'd like to. And I'd also like to ask, how can we bring magic into our lives? How can we live a life of magic? Like what are some things you maybe would recommend, like an apprenticing magician, to go out and experience life as magic?
Okay, well, I'll comment on the other thing first, and that's I don't think that this dualism, this anti-flesh dualism that our culture is in, is there by accident. I think it does serve, like you say, it serves purposes, it serves vested interests to make people more robotic and more controllable. Part of this is something else you touched on, which is that thinking of your body as like something else. It's almost like thinking of it as something outside of yourself. I mean, the very idea that you can think of a term like meat suit makes you think that, oh, there's a real me, and then there's an unreal me, which is the body. And it's if you look at other people walking about or whatever, you're looking at their bodies from outside. They're feeling them from inside. It's a completely different world. You're on two, you know, you're on two sides of a distorted, not even a distorting mirror, but it's like a portal. The surface of someone's awareness is like a portal. Outside of that, you're just another body walking around, as far as some other human is concerned. But inside of that, like you point out, it's this amazing multidimensional bit of technology. And the idea that, I think one of the errors that people get into, spiritual people get into about casting, you know, oh, the body, it's just a meat suit or whatever. I think that what they're actually talking about is, in a way, other people's bodies. You know, it's like as if we've actually projected the way that other people's bodies look onto our bodies. So we think of our body as a thing. And it's not a thing at all. It's not, you know, it's not like a glass of water or a book or a table. It's not like that at all. It's actually the basis of our moment-to-moment experience. And, well, you know, okay, it's certainly the basis of a good deal of our moment-to-moment experience. Anyway, so this does serve vested interests for people not to recognize that, instead to think of themselves in some restricted societal role, such as, yeah, worker in a particular industry or whatever, and happy to identify, more or less happy to identify with that and continue being a wage slave. I mean, that's capitalist society. In a militaristic society, it would be turning everybody into little soldiers and putting, you know, readying them for the army. Every society, every so-called advanced society anyway, a large-scale society, has got ways of turning people into robots of one sort or another. The other thing, getting more magic into our lives. Well, how did I do it? There's so many different bits of advice here, and I don't just want to trot out advice that you can find in books. There's lots and lots of good books, as well as lots of even far more absolute rubbish ones. But okay, the little bit of sort of advice from someone else's book, as it were, that I'll give is, I really like Lionel Snell's thoughts about what is magic. He writes under various names. Lionel Snell and Ramsay Dukes are the most common. He's been around for ages. He was one of the first people in the chaos magic current. And he writes really elegant little philosophical deconstructions of magic and everyday life. He's got his own YouTube channel, which is great. And he basically says, let's start from the idea that there's four basic tendencies in human thought. One of them is science, one of them is religion, another is art. And normally those are the three ways of thinking that are embedded in culture. And people go, oh yeah, I recognize all those, but there should be a fourth to recognize the full span of human thinking, and that is magic. So he's got this like quadrant of, you know, four quadrants. He's got this like, you know, this fourfold thing going on, which is art, science, magic, and religion. Now, each of these modes of thought is characteristic. So, you know, science is always trying to prove something by analysis. Art is trying to generate some form of communication, which is different from that, quite, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into details, but basically, magic is a kind of fast, intuitive, holistic way of viewing things. So and this is a normal human mental process, as Lionel describes in many pages of his last book. He goes into this in great depth. It's just something people do all the time, magical thinking. It's just that it's not culturally recognized. So one thing you can do is simply to recognize when you're thinking magically. Quite often one good example he gives of the use of magical thinking is in advertising. We get all these completely irrational associations are generated in advertising. Like, for instance, if you, I don't know, buy this car, you'll be sexier or something. And, you know, this is done all through images. And of course, it's nonsense in any logical sense, in any scientific view of it, complete nonsense. But it works because it engages people's magical thinking and associating a desired outcome with another symbol, in this case, the car. So it's used all the time in human discourse. That's one area, is to start recognizing where you're thinking magically. The way I did it wasn't actually like that. When I first decided to sort of step right into Chapel Perilous and start believing whatever I fancied believing, I actually started doing all sorts of minor magical acts just to see if anything would succeed. And one of the things that was fashionable about around that time, the late 70s in magic, early chaos magic, was sigils. And there's, still around. You can find loads of online advice about how to do them. But if you take something that you want, and it's really, really, really best to start off with something relatively trivial but quite unusual. Trivial so that you don't get too invested in whether it works or not. Unusual because then you'll be able to recognize it as an unusual phenomenon and do a spell to make it happen. This very simple kind of spell that got popularized in early chaos magic. It's an approach that was invented by an English artist and magician called Austin Osman Spare, who died in the 1950s. Absolutely wonderful artist, fabulous stuff. Just look his stuff up online. Lots of his texts are available free and so forth. He basically said, you don't have to use traditional symbolism in magic. You can if you want, but all you have to do is just write it down as an ordinary sentence. This is what I want. Cross out all the repeat letters and then mash all the remaining letters up into a monogram, a single thing that doesn't look like any of the letters particularly and doesn't remind you of anything particularly. It's just a nice monogram. Oh, that looks good. Your subconscious mind will associate that with the desire, but the desire has now stopped bothering you at a conscious level. So it can go on. That symbol, that sigil, then, as it were, sinks down into your subconscious, and that's the idea that it will change your world, that something different will happen. So you could do a spell to, I don't know, I'm just thinking of something absurd. It depends on your environment. How you don't want to be too absurd because it's very unlikely to happen. You don't want it to be too common. But let's say something relatively absurd. I'll just think of something off the top of my head. Right, so be given a grapefruit by a dark-haired person in the street. I don't know. I mean, that's too specific, perhaps. But you see what I'm getting at here. You see, looking at some unusual experience and seeing if you can make a spell for that to happen. It's best, like I say, if you're not heavily invested in it, it's probably not a good idea to try your first sigil for, I want to get a fantastic new job, or something important like that. But instead something you're much less emotionally invested in, because if you're heavily emotionally invested in a spell you're doing, your mind will keep turning it over, and your subconscious mind, that's really, or what you want to think of it as, your greater mind that's doing the magic, will get confusing signals. So it's best to be able to do magic and let go of it. And until you're well practiced, it's best to do it with things, therefore, that are not too emotionally invested in. So that'd be a good start. Sigils and mantras. You've probably heard of mantras in the context of Indian style meditation, mantras like Om and so forth. But you can make up your own mantras. You can again write the sentence down that expresses what you want to achieve, what you want to happen in your life. Break it down into syllables and scramble the syllables around, mash it all up, and make a little chant out of it, with the syllables, and run. So anyway, and what do you do with each of these things? With the mantra, just run it. Practice saying it to yourself and saying it silently inside your head for maybe quite a long time, say 10, 15 minutes when you're first doing this. You'll probably get quicker at it later. And certainly do it until it starts to sound absurd and probably loses its meaning. But don't go off on fantastic issues about it. Just try and focus on it, and then just let go of it and go and do something else that doesn't remind you of that. Go and do something, make yourself a cup of coffee, go and have something to eat, play with your phone, anything that just banishes, as it were, actually a little banishing ritual at the end, go back into normal consciousness. With a sigil, it's pretty much the same. Just stare at it until you can close your eyes and it's still kind of burned there in your vision, and just visualize it for as long as you can. Just really try hard to visualize it, not because not thinking about what you want, just visualizing the sigil, and then at a certain point just let go of it and go and do something to banish and bring yourself down to ordinary life. So there's a couple of quick tips for wannabe magicians.
Excellent. I love all those. It's interesting because the way that I'm thinking about how effective that is, if you do all those things, you're connecting a lot of things. So one of them would be the law of attraction. The law of attraction states that whatever I give my attention, energy, and focus to, I get more of. It's just common sense. So you're given lots of attention, energy, and focus. You're also making life fun. You're doing this thing, and it can be fun, and it can be exciting. Again, if you just think about a kid, and they're creating, whether they create a piece of art or whether they're learning how to do something, life is fun, and they're realizing that they create things. The other thing is you're moving into a creator consciousness. You're realizing that you have an effect on your reality, and what you're doing is that you're experimenting with your intention, your desires, with spirit, with the universe, and you're engaging in this cooperation. You're engaging in this communication with the universe. You're saying, hey, I'm doing something here, and I'm seeing what you're going to give back. Let's open up this dialogue. Let's experiment with this. And because people aren't noticing their realities, I had and the last thing I'll say, writing it down, it's so simple. When I had David Lombert Senepas on the podcast, and I spent 2 weeks with him. He's a native elder of the Mi'kmaq Nation, and probably the gnarliest human I have ever met, ever. And we went super intergalactic with, his upbringing and his knowledge and his way of life is not even close to a normal human's. He holds all the lineage of the native, of that community of I think thousands of years. There's oral written history. It's intense. But anyway, when you communicate with spirit, you got to write it down. Right. And the art of communicating with spirit. And what I realized I would be asking more, right. And really paying attention more. And spirit communicates in subtle ways. It'll communicate in, a bird, like, oh, look, it's a bald eagle or whatever. You need to learn how to pay attention to your reality. It's not, this thing where an angel is going to materialize out of the fifth dimension and tell you what to do. It's you start to really pay attention to your reality. And when you notice these energies and you notice these subtle communications, you realize that the universe is always communicating with you. And what I think that you're really touching on is opening up a dialogue between you and spirit, you and the universe working together. And people don't have that communication. They get into the car, the alarm goes off, they grab the coffee, they get out the door, the to-do list is on their mind, they go, they get to work, they complete the tasks, they stress out about what happened last week and about what they got to do for this week. They get home and you got more stuff to do. You maybe get a few minutes of television or something, and you repeat the process. And so there's no time for this communication and this realization that you are in this magical environment. And I was talking to my sister yesterday. It's like, when you have a lucid dream, that's great. You get to explore and fly, but life is the most lucid dream. And, it's the most lucid dream. You can go do things. You can go, cliff jumping. You can go, snowboarding. You can go climb a tree. You can go feel water. And, it's the most lucid. It's amazing. And if we can open up, really just the point to drive home would be open up that communication with spirit, with life, opening up a dialogue with life, I think is what those things allow you to do. What you're sharing is this fundamental play with life and this communication, this dialogue with spirit. So really amazing stuff. I know that you got to get going and I rambled, so I'll give it back to you. You can comment on that as much as you'd like. And if there's anything that you wish that I had asked or you'd like to dive into, the time is yours. So if you want to embellish, go as long as you'd like. Just want to be mindful of your time. And thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, great. You're welcome. The point, I really agree with the point you make there, that the best approach to magic is a playful one. If you're absolutely deadly, heavy serious about it, you not only won't get all the results you're heavily, deadly serious about, probably. You won't get as high rate of success, but it won't be any fun anyway. Make it fun, which is why, back in a century ago, I guess people who were into magic would probably have dressed up in very nice robes and gone to their Golden Dawn temples and stuff. If that is fun for you, then do it. You know, kit out a room or hire a room and kit it out temporarily and dress up in all these fabulous costumes and all of that stuff. If that's fun for you, then absolutely do it. If fun for you is doing your magic while you're doing adventure sports, then go that way. If fun for you is doing your magic by dressing up in a particular way and sitting in a cafe and drawing sigils, do it that way. You know, there's so many ways that you can enhance your life. But yeah, keep it playful, because that will get better results. And even if you don't get the result you expected, you'll have more fun in any case.
Yes, 100%. I agree with that. You keep it fun. I think that what was it? Is it Alan Watts has this really great video, and he just talks about life. And when you figure it out, and you realize you're going to die, then life either, you realize your time is limited, and it's either going to be a serious game or it can be a playful one. And he uses the analogy of, playing through life, going through life, going through that adventure in a playful manner, because that is a perspective that you get to choose. You get to choose that. You get to choose if it's serious. You get to choose if it's somewhere in between. And you get to choose if it's fun. And you'll notice that really the only difference, it's not the external circumstances of people and how they feel and they navigate life. It's the internal monitoring, and you get to control that. And when we're talking about breath work, magic, meditation, what that does is it just invites you into the body, into your multidimensional temple of advanced technology. And from there, you start to get to wire the programming of, okay, I get to choose how I view life, and I can open up this communication with all of life, which I am an advanced part of. And I have tools and technology beyond comprehension, and I can work with this spirit. I can work with this, and I create you always create your reality, whatever it is, you're creating it, and you have the power to create something else. And I'll just share kind of the idea of, like, think about things in 10 years. If you're at a job and, you like your job and you'd like to improve your life, just give yourself 10 years. Don't make it a year. What could you do in 10 years with a little bit of action each and every day? And it's that commitment towards the action, just start with a better idea. Or something that fulfills you a little bit more, right? And make it fun and make it playful, because it's a slow, long game, day to day to day, not instant, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We're conditioned to want that instant thing. Okay, I do the spell and it happens right away. No, play with it. Let it go. What other magic is there for you to experience today? And because we're kind of looking for that carrot at the end of the stick, we're forgetting all of the magic that's right around us each and every moment by interacting with our community, by learning to pay attention to nature and our surroundings, but really understanding the lens of our perspective, which is our choice. Money doesn't make you happy. I know people that have nothing, like nothing, and they're happy, and I know people who have way too much, just an extraordinary amount, and they're not happy. It's not the gauge. So we want security and things like that, and we can create that. So I'll leave that rant and just give it back to you again, for if there's anything that you want to leave the listeners with, if there's anything that you want to rant about before we close out, and just where people can find more about your work and what you're offering.
Okay. Well, there's one more topic I'd like to bring up before we finish, is that basically I don't want. Yeah, sometimes back in the day, before I was kind of actively into magic, and I'd sometimes hear people talking in or read books that seemed to be very enthusiastic and positive about where you could go with your life. And I never felt that it was necessarily as easy as some people made it sound. So I want to just make the point that this might sound easier than it is in some respects. And to explain what I mean by that, the kind of connected breath work that I coach, I got into that because of my emotional problems. One of the great coaches and theorists of connected breathwork is Stanislav Grof, who him and his wife invented holotropic breathwork, and he's written some superb books. And don't tell you how to do the technique, but there's some very interesting points about spiritual development and visionary states in there. And one of the things he points out again and again is that if people it's not always easy for people to get into what he calls transpersonal states. In other words, states beyond the personality, in higher states of consciousness, more inclusive states of consciousness. It's not always easy for people to get into transpersonal states. And sometimes when they kind of do so, either through holotropic breathwork or through taking psychedelic medicines, which was he was the great experimenter on LSD in the mid-50s in Czechoslovakia. And then they quite often collide with their bummers, with their dark side. And there's basically, it's sometimes difficult to break out of the roles we play. There's the reality of our life, which is what you've just been expressing, that it's a magical continuum. And at the core, we are pure consciousness, all of this good stuff. But a lot of the time in our everyday life, in our existence, if you like, there are things which stop us from participating in that bliss and that wonder. And those things are our roles. Sometimes they're societal roles, like we've just been talking about, and being a good worker or whatever. But sometimes they're personal roles that and everybody's got these. They've got them from their family, and they've got them from early interactions in childhood. They've got some twisted ideas of what reality is, what life is, and what life should be like. And those, quite often, you're not particularly conscious of those. And so I think if you're going to go on a full-scale spiritual or magical path, at some point you will have to deal with this demonic side of your own nature, this dark side of your own nature, which tries to pull you back like a gravity well into these limited and tragic roles that you play out again and again and again, never getting what you want. And we're all doing this to some extent. And of course, magic and higher consciousness, that's all about stepping out of that into the reality that the universe is much, much, much better than that. But I think a lot of people still have trouble crossing through that zone to get to the other side, as it were. And that is why breathwork was central for me in this. It's why it was central for a lot of Groff's people. And it makes two sides of the spiritual or magical path hang together for me. Both that ecstatic bliss that just happens in real time and has got no particular reason because it's the nature of things. And on the other side, that needing to deal with some very dark stuff from one's past, traumatized issues and things like that. So I think there's always that other side to the magical path. So just in case anybody who knows that already is thinking, well, this guy just ignores all that stuff, I would like to make it quite plain that I'm speaking as one who knows both sides of that path, and that it's important to both work on your emotionally stultified areas as well as to pursue actively your higher consciousness, because they are ultimately completely and totally linked.
Yeah, brother. I 100% agree. And I really like the point that you made, that it's not easy and it's not instant. It takes time. It's a process. And really, it makes me think of enlightenment. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Sure.
You're navigating life with just a different perspective, is really all it is. But this perspective allows with more freedom, more growth, more learning, and more awareness. And with part of that awareness, it is, they'll say the shadow work are the things, and the things about us that we don't like, or the things that we're ashamed of. And I'm going to have Robert Grant come on, who's this just brilliant guy. He has a course called The Etymology of Number on the Resonance Science Foundation. And the last one is The Mirror of Consciousness. And he just shares that it's not so much that we do things, like the bad things, like maybe we have a bad thought, angry, or we do something that's we deem negative. It's the shame and the guilt and everything that goes with it that we don't accept.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, if you can just accept all parts of yourself, accept that you get angry, accept that you feel ashamed, accept that the thing that you did created this feeling, because then you can change it and you can alchemize it, and it'll become a gift if you have the courage to go through that, because that is also a part of you. It's just accepting all parts of you, not just the pretty things, accepting when you mess up, you make a fool of yourself, you're embarrassed, you're not perfect. We're just learning. And so it's really that deep acceptance. And that's a challenging path. It is not easy. It's simple, but we're just navigating life with a little bit of a different lens, and we're doing our best. So I think that's a really, really beautiful point.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that's it. I agree. I think we've covered that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, what I wanted to, if there's anything else that you want to share, or anything you want to leave the listeners with, and just make sure that, you put your website in there, then get a hold of you. But anything you want to close out with, it was a really, I think after the technical difficulties, man, we really got into some just beautiful points there. I really enjoyed this conversation, and
yeah, I've enjoyed it too. It's been good.
Yeah. So anything you want to leave the listeners with, and where can they find more about you?
Well, I think the central place to go to for me is my website, which is www.chaotopia.com. chaotopia.com, and on there you'll find a list of you'll find some details about all. I've got about, I think, 8 books in print at the moment. Some of my books on breathwork, on incenses, on this latest one, Life Force, about breathwork and energy. A book about chaos magic seen from the point of view of mysticism and higher consciousness, which I wrote some while ago, and a book about the northern mysteries, the runes and things like that, and a couple of novels. So that's all on there. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me as Dave Leal. Probably find me on Twitter, or DLEEAHP. And yeah, I'm not very active on Facebook. I mean, you can friend me if you want, but I don't mind. But I don't do much on Facebook. So, which is probably like ahead of the curve. I mean, I'll probably be dead in another couple of, another year, won't it? The way that Zuckerberg's going. But so yeah, that's how you can find me if you want to. And from there you will also. Actually, I wonder if I have put. I redid the website, and I'm wondering whether I've re-put in the link for my YouTube channel. Oh, there's certainly some links for my YouTube channel somewhere on the website. It might be under my fiction. So yeah, that's it really.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure that all the links are in the show notes for the podcast, and I'll put them on YouTube as well. Make sure on your website you got a link to the YouTube as well, so people can find you. But thank you for coming on, man. Thank you for exploring the world of magic and kind of spreading a magical perspective around. So just appreciate you and your work, and it was a pleasure having you on.
It's been a pleasure doing this. You're welcome. Cheers, Matt.
Cheers. Take care. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.